So yeah, really, really warm welcome. My name's Garavavati, and we're actually on our last night of the meditation challenge, although the morning meditations are going to run until Friday. So put your hand up if you're on the meditation challenge. Okay, so a few of you, great. Yeah, so we've been meditating in the mornings on Zoom and coming to the Buddhist Centre once a week since beginning of January-ish. So yeah, and this is our last evening. We've been looking at, in these Wednesday evenings, at ways that we can deepen our meditation practice specifically. So we've been going through this particular model of deepening our meditation practice, and and tonight we're sort of finishing that model. So it's the last night of the challenge. But of course, you can keep meditating every day. That was the idea, that hopefully it will kickstart you into a regular meditation practice. So I'm going to say a little bit about what we talked about last week, and a bit more generally about what we've been talking about on these Wednesday evenings. And then in the second half, Maitreyabandhu is going to conclude this particular model for us. So what we were talking about last week was the importance of absorption. So getting really absorbed in our experience, particularly in our meditation experience. And I just wanted to say a bit more about absorption and the importance of absorption. Actually, often that's what we're really longing for, not just in meditation, but in our lives. We're longing to have all our energies moving in one direction, to be sort of fully embodied and fully, like, with the whole of ourselves, like wholly paying attention, wholly attending to what's in front of us. We long for that sort of total experience. But often, actually, how we behave isn't conducive to absorption. Often, actually, our experience of life is that it's quite thin. We can be a bit addicted to the surface of our experience. We can have this sort of resistance, actually, to going deeper into our experience, just out of habit, actually. And we often can have a feeling of being quite scattered. You might have that feeling of being a bit scattered, being a bit all over the place, and feeling like you want more from life, but like as you try and do more things, you're not quite getting what you want. Is that familiar to anyone? Yeah? So the general sense of that is that life was quite unsatisfying, and what intensifies is this longing for more. So it's like life feels unsatisfying, so you want more, but then what we look for to get more isn't quite in the right way, or it's not quite with the right type of mind. So in meditation, in Buddhist practice, actually what we're uncovering is a new kind of mind, a new kind of mind, or something which is sort of, we have a sense of it under certain conditions where we feel really connected to ourselves and connected to the world. So we're sort of rediscovering a capacity within us which is a bit beyond us. And Buddhist meditation and also Buddhist ethics, Buddhist practice helps us to uncover that new kind of consciousness, which is latent within us. It's our potential, but slightly beyond us as well. So that's what this figure of the Buddha represents, this sort of ultimate kind of mind, a loving mind, a mind which is radiant, which is luminous, which is completely open, but the ability to completely sort of focus like a laser in on something. So it's a mind which is really, really pliable, and a mind which we can apply it. We sort of controls maybe probably the wrong word. We can steer the mind in whichever direction we want to. Often we can have the experience that we're not really in control of our minds. It's like our thoughts, our emotions, lots of our behaviours, they feel like they descend upon us, so we can feel a bit out of control of them. So in meditation, we're learning to actually stay with our experience, to really pay attention to our experience. And when we do that, we can get absorbed in our experience. And actually, the main thing about that is that it's really pleasurable and it's really satisfying. And then that sort of builds a certain capacity and a certain confidence in that ability. And it then sort of radiates and penetrates the rest of our lives. So it's not just in meditation that we're looking for that type of absorption. And it's not just to relax and to experience pleasure, it's to see much more deeply the nature of our mind, the nature of our experience. And Maitreyabandhu is going to be talking a bit more about that in the second half. Yeah, so we were talking last week about how the Buddha would say that the reason we don't experience absorption, the reason we don't experience this really pleasurable sense of wholly attending to our experiences, because we don't stay with our experience long enough. We are flittering from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. We're not even really aware of that tendency to live on the surface of ourselves. So I'm going to recap just this sort of how to get to absorption, because it's all very well saying there's this lovely state called absorption, where it's this state of energized calm, all your energy's moving in one direction. It's a state of complete unification. It sounds really great, but how do we get there? So I'm just going to say a bit more about how we get there, what we've been talking about, sort of mapping out the last few weeks. The thing about absorption is that you can't just decide to get absorbed. Actually, it starts with paying attention to our direct experience, and it starts with just getting interested in what's happening right now. So it might be that your immediate experience is that, I don't know, maybe you feel a bit cramped next to the person next to you. Maybe you're wondering whether you should have come to the Buddha Center tonight. Maybe you're feeling like you wish you were somewhere else, or you're tired, or that might be your direct experience when we sit to meditate. It might not be that you enter this blissful absorption where you can just be with the breath. So you're paying attention to what is actually arising right now. What are you interested in? And then you're trying to sort of deepen that level of interest. When you start to pay attention to what's directly happening, without layering something over the top of it, like wanting to have a really blissful experience, when you just start to pay attention to the direct experience, interest naturally arises, it naturally deepens. And then we recollect, we sort of remember in a way the deepest value, remember why we've come to the Buddha Center, perhaps why we want to meditate. We can recollect that. And from that process of just paying attention to our experience, staying with it, allowing it to unfold, then absorption arises. Often what can happen when we sit to meditate, actually when I sit to meditate, is I can have an idea of absorption. I can have an idea that I want to stay with the breath, or I want to be in a really loving, open-hearted state. And then I'm not. When I sit to meditate, I'm not. Actually, what I directly experience usually is physical discomfort in my body, and then a resistance to that, and then an idea that I should be having a different type of experience. So that you might be familiar with that as well, that when you sit to meditate, we can often actually be cultivating frustration or coming up against our expectations of what we feel should be happening. And that actually pushes absorption further away from us, because we're not actually getting interested in the direct experience, which might actually be a bit unpleasant to begin with. So in a way, we're kind of strengthening that capacity to be in direct relationship with what's happening, to pay attention to that, and to know that, to kind of remember in a way, this is where perhaps the recollection can come in as well, is to remember that there is a possibility of depth, that absorption is possible. So we're remembering that actually if we stay with our experience, something can happen, something can deepen. And you will have all have had that experience in meditation or outside of meditation where, I don't know, it's almost like you forget to be preoccupied with yourself. Sometimes you can have it in an experience of beauty, like the week before last, did anyone see that amazing full moon? The wolf moon. Was it the wolf moon? Ruby knows about moons. Maybe not. Anyway, it was a full moon, right? Who cares? It was a moment of beauty. So in that moment, maybe you see the moon rising. I love seeing the moon rise in the sky when it's not a dark sky, you know, when it's a blue afternoon sky and you see the moon rise and it's quite low and it's big. And sometimes I can be walking along and then suddenly I see the moon. And it's like all my preoccupations with myself fall away, and I just have a direct experience of something. I want to say an experience of beauty, but that feels a bit too like mechanical or something. It's not that I'm like, oh wow, there's a moon, it's beautiful. It's more just like, it feels like something drops away basically, and in that dropping away I come into a deeper relationship with myself and with my place in the world. And there's a sense of ease and a sense of, well, I was talking last week, this is, for I think a lot of people, what absorption feels like is a sense of relief, of like, and in that moment I'm not thinking like, oh, there's the moon, it's beautiful, I must pay attention to the moon, how can I deepen my interest in the moon, can I get absorbed in the moon? It's just immediate, isn't it? It's like, oh wow, it's an aesthetic experience. And in meditation, we can start to meditate with that kind of mind, which is like an ascetic kind of mind. So where, and that that comes from being interested in the sort of raw data of our experience, which isn't, sadly, often like a beautiful moon rising in a clear blue sky. Often it's something else, like a bit swampy sometimes. That actually, if we can stay with that experience, it will kind of purify itself. It will sort of become more beautiful. So there's something about recalling these moments of absorption, or like where something falls away, where we forget ourselves, and at the same time we come into a deeper relationship with ourselves. That, in a way, that's what absorption can feel like in meditation. And just to say that absorption, that's not the end point. Absorption isn't the end point. There's like a reason why we're trying to cultivate absorption, or or set the conditions for absorption to arise. And Maitreyabandhu is going to talk a bit more about that in the second half. So one of the sort of a few main obstacles to absorption is that we don't stay with our experience long enough. So we don't sort of cultivate an interest in our direct experience. And B, because when we meditate, we can have lots of ideas around what should be happening, how we should be feeling. We layer that on top of the direct experience, and then what we end up cultivating is a frustration that we're not absorbed, or we're not focusing on the breath. So two things particularly can happen when we sit to meditate, which push absorption further away. So if you're sitting and you feel like the meditation isn't really going very well, and it's not, and you feel a bit like frustrated, see if you can get interested in the frustration. Where is that in the body? Can you drop down sort of like underneath the stories of that and just come back into the body and become interested in what is happening in the body? Often, maybe always, what will be happening is a contraction. You'll be gripping on in your body. So you can feel that, and then you can see, okay, how does that feel? Often it's painful. Okay, it's painful. Can you soften it? So you see, you've got interested, and because you've got interested in this, you're in the body, the interest will naturally intensify itself, because it will the meditation starts to have a life of its own. Oh, can I relax this? You're starting to get into your body, you're starting to notice the quality of your mind as well. And then you can recall that the possibility of something deeper, something more open is possible. And you can, in a way, like recollect that staying with your experience with awareness will bear fruit. Hopefully most of you know that, but if you don't, you can just pretend meditation, that's what you think, try it out. That's a way of recollecting, and then that's laying the foundation for absorption. You might have a moment of absorption, a moment of like, and then you might forget again, everything contracts, and then you go through the same process again. So quite often we're sort of going up and down through these intensifiers. So when you notice you're distracted, where's the gripping in the body? What are you really longing for? What's really going on in the experience? Can you feel it in the body? Stay with that. So you're moving through that, the interest, intensifying the interest, recollecting the possibility of that there's more than just this direct experience, and seeing if absorption arises. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time, maybe 5 minutes or so. So it'd be quite nice just to hear if anyone wants to share what their experience of the practice was, or what happened for your meditation. Did it seem true to you that if you could pay attention to the direct experience, then something could deepen in the meditation practice? Were you able to do that? Or what was getting in the way of that? Maybe you're all coursing deep in meditative bliss. Yeah, did you hear something?
Yeah, I experienced something that didn't feel like what I thought absorption would be. It just felt like a nothing. So I wasn't absorbed in the breath. It felt really good and dropping away. But then I was in, the breath dropped as well, and I was in a state of, I wasn't really focusing on anything or absorbed with anything. It was just a nothing.
So was it almost like the you and the breath sort of united in a way? So there wasn't you and the breath; it was just.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Or just both me and the breath disappeared.
Both you and the breath disappeared. Did you feel in touch with your body?
I felt very light.
Yeah.
Really good in the body.
Yeah. So I think that is an example of an absorption. It can feel a bit like it's kind of like a dissolving. So the sense of yourself as a subject and then the breath as an object. That sort of differentiation doesn't really make sense, and you're not really sort of thinking in those terms, and it's not even really a thought. It sounds that you had that kind of experiential sense of that. So it sounds like you did get quite absorbed there. And it's interesting if that does happen. If you start to get absorbed, what you can do is then just relax into that. It's quite hard because it's easy, because it's pleasurable. Like you're saying, it's easy to then grasp onto it and to be like, oh, I'm feeling a sense of nothing. This is really exciting, and then you then suddenly you're back feeling a strong sense of yourself. So, if when that happens, you can just keep relaxing and keep that sense of curiosity and just really enjoy it as well, because that sense of absorption, it's really, really good for the whole system. It's really pleasing, and there's a sort of calming effect through the whole system, your mind, your body. So it's really good to just relax into that and really dwell in that. It's really, really, really good. So yeah, it's great that you had that experience. Yeah.
I always feel like, like the moment between being awake and being asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're in a dream and you step off the curb and you're like, oh. I always feel like I'm at that point, and then I'm so scared to go to sleep. I almost wake myself up, if that makes sense. Like I'm always almost there, and then I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to fall asleep. And then come back into the room.
So I don't know if you're talking metaphorically, or do you mean you really
really.
are about to fall asleep? Yeah, sorry. I thought you were like some metaphor for getting concentrated. No, you're literally about to fall asleep.
It's pretty good, but I just don't want to fall asleep on the person next to me. So
Yeah, and I guess in a
shake
way,
myself to wake myself up.
yeah, I
It's
guess
lovely.
I guess kind of like the purpose of the meditation isn't to fall asleep in a way. So interesting. It's interesting what you're saying about that thing of like feeling a bit like, oh, we need to like not fall off the curb, or however you described it, a sense of like gathering yourself in, and then the sleepiness comes. So actually often, like instinctively, what happens when we're feeling sleepy is we tense up around it, like, oh, I mustn't fall asleep, I might fall on the person next to me, and you're tensing, and then you kind of go from this tense contraction to this like complete, almost floppy but not quite, because then you tense up like those dolls that you press and they do a bit like that in your mind. So actually when you're feeling sleepy, what can help is actually, again, the same applies really, to try and get interested in that and almost relax a little into the sleepiness, rather than thinking, oh, I mustn't, like, oh, I'm feeling a bit sleepy, where is my energy in my body? Is it quite low down? Is it quite high up? The grogginess. So you're trying to get interested in the sleepiness, which then actually will bring a certain level of engagement and alertness. But it's not that kind of like, I mustn't fall asleep kind of. It's a deeper, more subtle sense of engaging. But it's a bit counter-instinctual, like you were saying. It's really interesting the way you described it. Yeah, like not wanting to fall off the curb, Yeah. Another thing you can do as well is just have your eyes open just a little bit, so you let the light in. Like if you're feeling, and that can also help. Yeah. Yeah.
I think something you said about stretching your mind to include all of your experience really clicked for me. Sort of found when thoughts came up, I was able to kind of see them almost a bit like, I don't know, like an ache in my leg or something, like the context of them felt bigger somehow.
Right.
And that kind of made it easier to then sort of be absorbed, I think, because it felt like I was maybe operating from a bigger base or something. And normally I feel quite possessed when thoughts come up. So that was really useful.
So it sounds like, the sense of the practice of stretching the mind out meant in a way like you had a bigger container for thoughts that might come and usually carry you off or can get you completely absorbed in the thought. Yeah.
And the relationship to them was better somehow.
Yeah, like a lighter relationship or more spacious, yeah. It's such a nice instruction, Maitreyabandhu. I stole it from Maitreyabandhu. Borrowed? Taken. Sorry. Given, yeah, bestowed. Anyway, yeah, I really love that instruction of the sense of stretching as well, because you know what it's like when you when a thought comes and you kind of hook onto it, and but the idea, it does need to sort of, I like the word stretching because it implies a bit of effort to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to broaden out, and it can feel like that concept, and you stretch it out, and yeah, I'm glad that it was helpful. Okay, so maybe one more. Yeah, Patrick.
A few people online were
talking
about
great.
How they feel more absorbed in the evening rather than in the morning.
How
it might be easier to sort of get into that relaxed state in the evening rather than in the morning.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Like the time of day that we meditate will have an effect. Lots of people do meditate in the morning, but I think sometimes the hindrance that can come first thing in the morning is going through one's to-do list of everything we have to do, and I can have this sense of in my body, it just feels like this forward momentum of something's drawing me forwards into the day. So yeah, it is interesting to find what time of day suits you to meditate. It will be different for different people. So some people feel more alert, more awake, they want to meditate in the morning, but other people do, like they're saying, meditate in the evening and feel a deeper sense of calm, feel more able to get absorbed. So it is quite interesting to experiment actually with what works best in your routine and what works best in terms of concentration. Yeah.
New jacket. Thank you. I just thought I'd introduce my jacket to you. Somebody left me what is it? What did I left? John Lewis. John Lewis. Token. Anyway.
Show the lining.
No. That's the thing you'll remember as well, isn't it? Oh, I really like the guy who showed his jacket. Anyway, welcome online. I hope there's some reviews going online already. People saying good things about the jacket. It's quite rare having jackets, so I thought, Anyway, when you're up here, you'll be able to introduce your jacket, won't you? Okay, so where do I want to start? So I said right at the beginning that Buddhist meditation is always a question of moving towards the Buddha, yeah? That's why we have the figure of the Buddha in the room. Or rather, it's more moving towards a state of mind, to use the language of mind, which sounds too heady, but moving towards a state of being, a state of mind. You'd almost want to say a state of soul, except for that's there's no soul in Buddhism, but metaphorically, that's getting a deeper sense of self, I think soul as a word is fine for a metaphor for a deep sense of self, yeah? Not merely the self that writes emails and gets on buses, but a sense of, deep concern with various things and structure and so on. So we're always trying to move towards, from a Buddhist point of view, towards enlightenment. That's what Buddhism is, yeah? And it might be tiny, tiny baby steps, but even by now you'll be a tiny bit closer than you were probably when you arrived. You know what it's like? You get there, you do a little bit of meditation, you think you're all distracted, you have a cup of tea, and you do actually by now feel slightly better. Yeah. So Bhante Sangharakshara, the founder of this movement, he said that you measure the spiritual life in inches, not in miles. Yeah. But some of us, it's going down to centimetres. Some of us occasionally millimetres. Anyway, we won't go there. So you're moving towards this state of mind that's imaged by the Buddha figure. A state of majesty, of glory. Now, that, as I said right at the start, that awakened consciousness is sometimes how it's talked about, except for consciousness sounds too conscious. That awakened mind, that awakened soul, that awakened being is beyond the physical senses and the rational mind. Yeah? It's actually beyond time and space as well as we usually experience it, and it's beyond causality as we usually experience it. Not literally. Who might say not literally, but you name it, it's beyond it, basically. Yeah. So it's, at the very least, it's beyond the physical senses and the rational mind. Yeah. So, when someone says to the Buddha, okay, how do I have that experience? How do I become a Buddha? How can he explain something that's beyond the physical senses and the rational mind? That's beyond time and space. That's beyond. It's vitally important to know that it's beyond the basic bifurcation that we make in life between me and you, between self and world. Yeah. In enlightened consciousness, that separation no longer exists. Yeah? It goes beyond that kind of idea of a really existing self in a really existing world. That's an operational idea that we all have and came into life with, and it's very useful because it can get you on a bus, it can get you to a concert, it can get you to work, but it's not actually the case. Yeah, you're not a separate and real self in a separate and real world. Yeah, something else is going on, but then as soon as you say, what is it? You can't really answer it. In fact, you can never answer it because it's beyond the physical senses and the rational mind. There's no way of explaining that. Yeah. So the Buddha was described as being what's called technically metaphysically reticent, which basically means he didn't talk about that very much. What he would say is, never mind all that. Do what we've just been doing. First of all, develop interest in healthy things. He'd say, practice these object-determining mental events that we've been doing through these last 4 or 5 weeks. And why he's saying that is because he would say, you're in no position to ask me about that. You are bound to misunderstand me. Yeah? As soon as I was to try and say anything about it, you are bound to misunderstand me because your mind isn't fit enough, it's not flexible enough, it's not large enough, it's not curious enough, it's not, you name it. Yeah. So he'd be saying, actually, the first thing is, so if you're really interested in that, you need to work with your mind. You need to make your mind radiant, flexible, ductible, genuinely curious, undefended, and undivided, non-neurotic, so that you've got a mind that you can ask that question of me. Yeah, that's what he's saying. So he's then teaching us these stages all the way up into absorption, into what's called samadhi, which really means absorption, but absorption much, much more than you realise absorption can go. You've been absorbed in a novel, in a piece of music, in a landscape, in a conversation. But meditative absorption can go further than you ever could imagine, really. The value of that absorption is it makes your mind incredibly, incredibly like snow, yeah, that you can make an imprint on it, like freshly fallen snow, like beautiful and imprintable. So with that kind of mind, it's like virgin snow, you then turn that mind very slightly, just like that, just slightly to the left, toward how things really are. Yeah? And the Buddhist word for that is prajna, usually translated as wisdom, but again that sounds too heady, it sounds too much like wisdom is something you could say. And by definition, wisdom is something you can't say. Yeah? If you can say it, it's not wisdom, by definition, because it's beyond the physical senses and the rational mind. So when people fall out over metaphysics, actually they're out of they're already out of the game. Yeah, there isn't a way of talking about reality. There isn't one. Yeah, it's not possible. What the Buddha would say is, well, first of all, you need a kind of mind in which you can usefully turn your mind towards reality. At least that's how he tended to emphasize. I'm wanting to bring in more, and we're wanting to bring in more, that's true. That is what the Buddha taught. And sometimes he said, you could just start that right away. You don't need to wait until you've got this incredibly absorbed and snow-like mind where the slightest print of a sparrow will, I see it all. You'll never get there, will you? You think, okay, I might need to go to Tibet for a few years to do that. So you can be over fastidious about that if you're not careful. You can think, My mind is never ready to turn towards reality. Yeah? So in one moment the Buddha would say that's what you need to do. Another moment the Buddha would say just reflect on reality now. Yeah. So we're going to have a go at that tonight, reflecting on reality. Now it's interesting this because you can actually, according to Buddhist tradition, get stuck in absorption in samadhi. I mean, I was in fat chance. If only I was stuck in these kind of incredibly blissful states and I couldn't get myself to think about reality. I think so I don't think it's quite, for most of us it's not quite that, but even Buddhism can become a kind of refined hedonism. Yeah. And I've definitely seen this, and I've seen it in all sorts of things. I've seen it with people doing 5 rhythms. I've seen it in people doing psychotherapy. I've seen it in people doing yoga. So if you're not careful, things that are valuable start to become an end in themselves. They start to be something that they're kind of a refined hedonism, and sometimes actually, frankly, not that refined. So you're really keen about your alcohol-free beer, then you have your kind of your detox smoothie, and you do your yoga stretchy thing like that. They do that, don't they? They do that. Note my understanding of yoga. I've seen it in the cultural sphere where you get into opera or you get into philosophy, and you get this rather rarefied, pipe-smoking, port-drinking atmosphere. But what happens when you do that? When you turn valuable things into an end in themselves, they start to become narcotic. They sort of fossilize on you. I've met people out there who have very refined and in many ways very admirable lives, but there's something slightly dead about it. They're very successful. They might be very urbane, very intelligent, very thoughtful, in a way living in a kind of absorbed and positive way, but there's something slightly dead about it. It's slightly prideful, it's slightly snobbish very often. And I've seen that in meditation as well, where people get like that about meditation. They have, some of my friends are blessed with having very, very sort of blissful experiences in meditation, which frankly I'd like a bit more of. But where can you get it at this time of night? It's not over the road, I can tell you. I've tried, I can tell you. So I might be just talking with pure jealousy here, but weirdly you can get even a bit sort of prideful and a bit sort of snidey about your wonderful meditations. Yeah. So the principle there is that even good things, if they become ends in themselves, if they become what your life's about, those things actually start to betray you. If you make dance, or if you make poetry, if you make making money, or if you make being an entrepreneur, what you're about, it will start to betray you. It starts to kind of fossilize on you and sort of limit you. Yeah, and that's true at every level, including highly absorbed meditation, where really you'd think you're in heaven, basically. The experience of very deep meditation is basically the experience of being an angel in heaven. Yeah? It feels like that. It's blissful, it feels timeless, etc. But the Buddha would say, we're not doing that, because that will start to fossilize on it. You'll start to identify that with that, and as soon as you start to identify with that, you'll start to grab it. As soon as you start to grab it, it starts to become something else. Yeah. So he's only teaching samadhi so that you can then turn your experience, your mind towards the nature of things. Yeah. That's what Buddhism's all about, to see how things really are. It's not even trying to understand Buddhism or see what Buddhism teaches. It's to see how things really are. And what Buddhism is an endless set of footnotes on that, how things really are and how you see things as they really are. And I don't want to get stuck in that, otherwise we won't meditate. So here's what I want to do tonight. I want to then think, okay, we're going to take up this other model. Instead of thinking we're going to go through these stages, we're just going to go straight into trying to cultivate prajna, which is, as I say, usually translated as wisdom. So here's what the Buddha would say. He'd say, okay, so there's various weak spots in reality as you perceive it. Because when we say reality, We always need that as you perceive it afterwards, because the reality we experience isn't reality. Yeah, it's a bit like the Matrix. It all seems really real, but it's not. Yeah, that's what Buddha would say. Except for in the Matrix, reality is horrible, isn't it? And like you're in a bath or something. I vaguely remember, like a bit weird, and you get these big spidery things. Anyway, it's a long time ago. What he says, there's various weak spots in reality as you experience it. That if you apply yourself to those weak spots, if you focus on that, your experience can open out to a reality that I can't talk about. So it's an important distinction, because the Buddha's not saying anything about reality itself, because he can't, strictly speaking. What he can do is say, here's the place to push, here's the door. Yeah. Now here's the door, don't go there because you probably won't make much progress with that. Here's the door. Traditionally there are 3 doors, but I want to just get us to start thinking about one door at the moment, which is a door that the Buddha tends to kind of emphasize first. And that's a simple fact, the obvious fact that all things are impermanent. Yeah? He says that the impermanent nature of all experience is like the weak spot in reality. If you bring your mind to that, if you do that diligently, and if you do that with all the things that we've been teaching, reality, whatever that is, because remember that even that word is just an abstraction, doesn't mean anything, it's just an abstraction, and reality is not an abstraction, it's anything but an abstraction. It couldn't be less of an abstraction, yeah. But unfortunately you have to use abstract nouns. You're trying to touch on that door and find a way of opening it. Yeah. So what I want to do tonight is let's see whether we can do that. Yeah. I want to see if we can do that. So I try not to say much about how, because I'll try and lead us through it. But a few things to say. So probably the main thing is this is not a philosophical point really. It sounds like one. So you don't need to labour over it. All things are impermanent. So let's have a think about that. But hang on. What about mountains? Oh yeah, I suppose they sort of are. Yeah, hang on. What about DNA? Oh yeah, but you don't need to you don't need to write an essay on it. The Buddha's just saying, it would just say, it would roll. I presume the Buddha wouldn't roll his eyes, but probably a bit more compassionate than that. But so the one thing to say about any reflection is you're not pondering over it. You're not trying to crack your head on it. You're just like, ideally you've got into this more flexible, ductile, alive state of mind, like turned over soil that you're trying to cultivate in meditation. And you just keep dropping in this reflection that things are impermanent. But you're trying to see it meditatively, not think about it, not teach it. Pretty easy to teach. Most things are actually, if you've got that gift. Not teach about it, not think about it, not write about it. You're just trying to see it meditatively, see the truth of it. And that's like, oh, that's all. Yeah, it's just like just like you've had that in life where, okay, I see. When you get something, that moment when you get something, and you have this physical, full experience of, oh yeah, it's that very particular moment. That moment of, I get it, could go all the way up to the enlightened moment itself. Yeah, and it's not to do with seriously pondering over it. It's to do with keep coming back into your whole experience, like we've been teaching, keep coming back into your body, and dropping in this insight reflection, dropping in this prajna reflection. Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of this movement, he said that prajna reflections are a bit like salt. You don't need very much of it. Just a wee sprinkle, that's all you need. And most of it you need to be cultivating openness of heart, embodied experience, whole experience. One of the reasons why we can't turn our mind to the nature of things is because we're too hard-hearted. Every time we get into self-pity, every time we get into indignation, every time we get into sort of hard success highs, all we do is we harden our heart, yeah? And we harden our heart against reality, yeah? So you need to soften your heart, you need to open up your heart, you need to open up your body sense, and in that larger context, you meditatively try and see that everything you experience is impermanent, yeah? And you don't know what that's going to lead you to, because, just one more thing perhaps, it's not saying that things end. That's what it usually gets translated as, that the Buddha is saying that things end. That would be a kind of stoicism, yeah? Where you just say, da-da-da-da, all good things, but they end, yeah? It's saying something like, good things end, yeah? Bad things end. That sounds good. Good things start. Good things end. So there's no way of holding it. You don't actually know what impermanence means. We tend to think impermanence means things will end, but it also means things will start. It's the same law. Yeah? Good things will start. It's just as much a part of an impermanence. My new jacket is just as part. So I get that. It's just as much a part of an impermanence as when I need to, take it to Lama's pajamas. Yeah, the same impermanence. So you don't know how to feel about impermanence. So it's worth remembering that it's not a kind of Buddhist stoicism. You're not trying to say, yeah, things end, so I better let go of things. Buddhism does teach that, but it teaches that as a motivational thing, not as a metaphysic. Yeah, it teaches that as like, get a grip, for heaven's sake, get on with it. You're going to die soon. Get on with something valuable. That Buddhism does teach that a lot. But when it comes to these reflections, it's not particularly teaching that. It's saying, okay, let's try and have a meditative understanding that all of your experience and all experience is impermanent. Nothing perdures. There is nothing to hold on to. Yeah.